As part of the EPGP International Immersion program, we got the chance to meet several dignitaries. One of them was Mr. James Rooney. He's the CEO and chairman of Market Force and vice chairman of the Seoul Financial Exchange. So thank you, Mr. Rooney, for agreeing to talk to us. So we just have a few questions for you. How does the Korean way of thinking play out in the business in Korea? You spoke a little bit about the flag and different contrasting ways of thinking. Maybe you can share some thoughts on that.
So I think when you look to do business with Korea, there is something very important to bear in mind. The Koreans actually put it there for us right in the middle of their flag, and they call it the taeguk. It's this yin and yang symbol, a red and blue symbol in the middle of the flag. And there are many ways to interpret that, hot and cold, man and woman, heaven and earth, and so on. But I think for practical purposes, one of the useful ways to understand what the Koreans are telling us is, first of all, they like to be part of a group. And if you're not in the group, it's very difficult to connect with them. So try to create some sort of group feeling in whatever you do. And then, secondly, the blue part I like to think of as sort of logical way of going about things, analytical. And the Koreans can be very logical and analytical, but the red part also says that emotion is very important to them as well. And both logic and emotion can be positive or negative. If you want to do business successfully with Korean people, it's good to try and get started on positive aspects of logic, which most of us can relate to. That goes across many cultures. But when something comes out that sounds contradictory to that, stop a minute and just think this is probably an emotional reaction. They're probably needing to let out some sort of emotion and allow it to come out. Even if it's a bit of a theater, even if it's a bit of a drama, or even if it's a bit of a rant and a rave, let it come out. Don't fight it. Because in the morning you may have a great meeting with them on a logical basis. You'll have a lovely lunch together, chatting and becoming friends. In the afternoon, it seems like things have gone off track. And if you fight it, they will definitely go off track. But if you let it flow just like a river, right? Let it flow and wash away, then you'll go to dinner with them in the evening. They will open the soju and the beer and drink with you, want to go to the karaoke and have a song. And later in the evening, when you're all pretty much sort of head drunk and head achy and ready to go home, they'll turn to you and say, "Oh, I love you, my brother. Let's do that deal." And the deal is done. If you try to rush it without letting all of these other things happen, it won't stay glued together.
So do you have any interesting experiences from your stay in Korea? You've been here since 1996. So is there anything interesting that you'd like to share with us about your experience as a consultant and in other roles here?
Oh, there are millions of things I could share with you, but I think maybe it would take too long for one interview. So.
Sure. Okay. All right. And how do you see in Southeast Asia? You spoke about Korea being the ballerina and Japan being like the samurai. How do you see this play out in the next decade or so?
Well, I think the important thing to recognize is that although Japan and Korea seem superficially to be very similar, they look the same. They have, most of them have black hair and golden skin, the same as the Chinese as well. These are really three very different countries, three very different cultures, three very different dynamics. And Japan's era has essentially come to an end. Japan is in decline now. I call it the golden sunset. Don't cry for me, Argentina was Eva Perón. Well, don't cry for me, Japan. Japan is going through a transition. Where Korea, on the other hand, which has always been a little sister to China, a very welcome part of the Chinese family on an extended basis, is actually in its ascendancy. It's reaching the top. It's got the opportunity to ride the Chinese elephant. And I call Korea a little ballerina, like the sort of rather heavy and heavily armored samurai of the Japanese, who have often offended people in their neighborhood. Korea can be very charming, as we saw in the Olympics. And for China, they're kind of a little sister. There's an opportunity for the two to cooperate together economically, even though, unlike most of the other countries that get benefit from China, Korea has no natural resources. It's really just human talent. Some of that human talent today is in advanced industries that China hasn't yet developed. there are other ways that Korea has to use that human talent for the future to be able to engage successfully with China without competing with China, be complementary to China.
It's interesting you mentioned about the human element of it, because in India as well we have the human element, but it is being used in the services industry more predominantly, whereas here it is this focus completely on exports. So is that something, how do you see these differences play out? Do you see an advantage of one over the other?
So let me put it to you a little bit differently. Korea has been built on its manufacturing industries, which is odd because we have no natural resources. And yet we've been very successful at building industries that depend upon natural resources, following largely the Japanese model, it's a very efficient and high quality model that's emerged. And the service sector has always been the largest part of Korea's economy, about 50% or more. And yet, when you look at government policy, they almost completely ignored the service sector. The Koreans haven't been very active at building their service sector. And part of the reason is the service sector is typically made up of intangible skills, things you can't see and touch. Service in a hotel, how can you see it and touch it? Many things that Korea has not yet learned to do well are in the service sector. India, on the other hand, as you point out, has often been in the vanguard of development of the service sector. So I think Korea still has plenty of space to grow its economy beyond the manufacturing sector, although I think and hope that it won't abandon the manufacturing sector simply because fundamentals change. Britain did that, and I think it's a great loss. America has a mediocre manufacturing sector in things like cars and steel and so forth, and I think that was not necessary, having been involved very deeply in some of those sectors. So I think Korea and Japan can continue to serve the world well with their manufacturing. But for Korea in particular, its opportunity is maybe to learn things from India and the service sector and how to monetize those, how to make them commercial and not just activities you do because they're necessary.
Okay. Well, what do you think about, what are the lessons India can learn from Korea?
There are many lessons India could learn from Korea, like about economic development, the role of government, development of infrastructure, and so on. The problem is, I'm not sure that India, in the aggregate, is structured to learn those things. So the learning may be more on a state-by-state basis or a city-by-city basis, because India's states and provinces are bigger than the whole of Korea. So at the central government level, you could learn a lot, but I'm not sure that you have the environment being able to use it. Whereas perhaps at the more local level, and the best way to learn might be to bring Korean partners, Korean manufacturing companies or Korean partners of other sorts into India, and recognize that the Koreans can learn from the Indians about the service sector, but the Indians can learn from the Koreans about other things, including increasingly design. Now, let me take one other example just in closing, which is to recognize that Bollywood and other areas have had a thriving cultural industry. India itself has very rich cultural heritage. Korea has been so busy developing its economy and its manufacturing sector that until fairly recently it really hadn't shone in those areas. It's now starting to shine. Korean dramas and music and other things are becoming outstanding. And I think those are actually in harmony with India. So let's see more Indian and Bollywood and things like that here in Korea. And let's see more of Korea's pop music and dramas in India. And then we won't just have this currently very famous video, Oppa Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style.
But we'll have, Oppa Bombay Style.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Rooney. Okay, we're done.
Okay.